Hey everybody! So today's video is going to be sort of a more speculative video about the upcoming Life is Strange Double Exposure, a game that I'm very much looking forward to, especially because a lot of the recently released media around it has, for me at least, sparked a lot of curiosity, and I know for a lot of other fans as well. And don't worry, we will be talking about not Rachel Amber, so stay around as we go through some theories about Life is Strange Double Exposure. So, sort of as a recap, Max's friend Safi ends up being murdered. She finds her body and finally begins to use her power again, but instead of it being her traditional, rewind power, she's able to flip between two different timelines. One where Safi is alive, and the other where she is dead. Max plans on using her ability to travel to each timeline to solve her murder and possibly prevent it. It's not super clear on what her exact goal is. This has sparked a lot of debate about what is the canon ending of Life is Strange 1. Something that a lot of people agree on, and I do as well, is that the timeline where Safi is alive versus the one where Safi is dead, each of them are going to be connected to an ending of the first game. So maybe in the timeline where Safi is dead, Chloe is alive, and vice versa. It could even be possible that, whatever ending you select that you've done, like, how at the beginning of every game they say, did you sacrifice Arcadia Bay or did you sacrifice Chloe? Before the game even begins, depending on what your answer is, the timeline where Safi dies, where Max starts out in, could be, just whatever timeline that is. So the timeline where she's alive would have all these details that your Max from your choice would have never experienced. And that could open the doorway to a lot of very emotional scenes, like the return of characters who are confirmed to be dead in the Sacrifice Arcadia Bay timeline, Max going to this different timeline, and then meeting them there. I feel like that's a goldmine of sort of nostalgia and like emotional hits as well. One thing I noticed is that the overall plot for this game, that being Max traveling between two timelines, is almost like I hate to say it, but almost a watered down version of what ends up happening in the comic series. In the series, Max basically is traveling between different timelines. And basically, because of the choices that she made in the first game, the comic takes place within the timeline where Chloe is alive. You save Chloe at the end, this is what's next. What ends up happening in the comic is that as Max is going about life, she is flickering in and out of her timeline that she's currently in and other alternate timelines. There's a really interesting panel where her and Chloe are having a discussion and it turns into an argument because there's a miscommunication. And if you notice, Chloe's outfit completely changes, and that's meant to kind of tease the fact that she just flipped between two different timelines. And ultimately, by the end of the first issue, she sort of surrenders herself to time and is transported to what is believed to be her correct timeline, that because of her choices, she's sort of out of where she's supposed to be, and that this is going to correct it. And apparently, other Maxes throughout other timelines are doing the same thing, because when she gets there, she's back in Arcadia Bay once again, but she's with Warren, and he says to her, "Oh, you're not my Max. You're slightly different. I can tell the difference," showing that in this world, they got very close. Later on, I'll talk about some other elements I think that they could take from the comic and that I think would be very interesting. I also, if you guys are interested, I would absolutely love to do a deep dive into the comic series. I've been rereading it lately and I find it so interesting. So if you guys would like to see a deep dive into what happens in the comics and how it could possibly, affect Double Exposure, please let me know in the comments. Sort of branching off from the comics, how she's flickering between different timelines and meeting different characters that way. An idea has floated around that it could be a fun sequence if Max sort of experiences some what-if moments. Basically, she briefly would enter these, third and fourth and fifth timelines just for a moment before figuring out how to go between Safi being alive and Safi being dead. These timelines may even include the timeline where Chloe is disabled, the a possible timeline where her family never leaves Arcadia Bay to begin with. Another possible ending is a debunked fan ending that someone came up with where Max takes a bullet for Chloe. Apparently this was in talks for the original ending of Life is Strange, and that was one of the options. I think I talked about that in my first video, I'm not too sure. But finally, another very interesting one would be the ending that was ultimately, taken out of the game, where Chloe ends up in a coma due to being shot, but she ends up being alive. With the absence of Chloe in a lot of, in all of the trailers and teaser images, things like that, it wouldn't shock me if we got sort of that, Chloe alive and well in some sort of wham shot at the end. You know how after the montage you'll have a reveal and then the episode will end. Sort of think of when, when you go to the timeline where William is alive and he walks to the door and then it's revealed, oh, Chloe's in a wheelchair. Sort of a moment like that, but it would be with Chloe. Now, the emotional side of it would be completely different depending on if you sacrificed her, or if you sacrificed Arcadia Bay, and maybe they had some sort of falling out along the way. I'm sure that's something we'll learn about their relationship. However, little side tangent, I hate in movies when they take a character or characters that have a good relationship, and then to cause drama, they're just like, oh, and then they had a falling out, and then they divorced. I'll throw some examples up. Like Dr. Grant and Ellie in Jurassic Park. Hell, even Diego and Lila in the most recent season of Umbrella Academy. I really don't like when they manufacture that kind of tension for seemingly just, for plot's sake. Something prominently featured throughout a lot of the promotional media for this game is that Max has a cat. And this is something that I would say fits very well into the character of Max. I mean, she seems like a cat person, let's be honest here. I don't know if she ever explicitly says it. I'm sure somebody can point that out in the comments. But for me, as soon as I saw the cat, I couldn't help but think of the Schrodinger's cat paradox. For those of you who don't know, the Schrodinger's cat idea is meant to explain quantum physics. There is a cat with a bottle of poison in a box. Is the cat alive or is it dead? You don't know until you lay your eyes on it. So it is simultaneously alive and dead until you get that concrete information. Sort of like Safi. Seeing as Max is going between two different timelines, one where she's alive and one where she's dead, Safi is sort of in a purgatory. She's neither fully alive or fully dead, sort of similar to Schrodinger's cat. And I'm sure with the amount of small details and little books here and there that are, littered throughout all of the Life is Strange games, there's absolutely going to be either a direct or indirect, relation to this idea. The trailers and the gameplay footage that we've gotten for Double Exposure don't feature any in-person characters from Arcadia Bay. It's just Max. There's a photograph of Chloe, but that's about it. And she's briefly mentioned in conversation. This has brought up the idea that, is it possible that the killer, Safi's killer, is from, Arcadia Bay? Someone from Max's past. Which I think is an interesting idea. And there's a few different ways that this could go about, happening. We know from Chloe's funeral that a lot of Max's friends end up coming to it. Kate, Warren, even people that, she's not friends with are at this funeral. This shows that in the timeline where Chloe ends up being sacrificed, Max is well known enough that people care about her and are willing to come to her friend's funeral to support her. Because, let's be honest, nobody knew Chloe. Once she was kicked out of Blackwell, she spent all of her time with Rachel or trying to deal drugs to people. That's not the kind of person you really, show up to support at their funeral. So the idea there is that in some way, shape, or form, somebody's life goes horribly wrong, they feel betrayed by Max, and they end up coming to her college in order to kill her friend out of some sort of revenge. Or it could even be Nathan, that he was released on some sort of good behavior, or maybe he made progress in his therapy, and in one way or another, he has fallen back to this older state, and he purely blames Max for putting away Jefferson, for getting him in trouble, and ends up going after her. And depending on the timelines, flipping back and forth, he might not have the motive in the timeline where Safi's alive. We really don't have many details on that timeline. Is it that, somebody attempted to kill her and she got away? Or is it that, the attempt didn't even happen? Maybe she went down just a different path. One theory that has a little more ground, with the very limited amount of information that we have right now, if it had to be someone returning from Arcadia Bay, it could be Mark Jefferson. Safi mentions that she was speaking to a publisher. Now, she doesn't specify which kind of publisher. Jefferson was well known enough that he was known by many things, and he had written several books. Max mentions reading them at some points in the first game. Now, if this is a timeline where Arcadia Bay was destroyed, and Jefferson wasn't killed by David in the bunker, that means he could be alive and that he would have had a reasonable amount of time to escape. Now, the better question is, why would he be murdering Safi and not going after Max? Because he would remember everything he did. Because, he would know that Max was onto him. That's why he took Nathan's phone and tried to lure them to the junkyard. Now, even in the timeline where Jefferson is arrested, it's possible he could have escaped, but I feel like at that point, he would be so recognizable that he wouldn't just be some publisher. I feel like Safi would say, hey, isn't that the famous artist who got arrested for, kidnapping women and taking photos of them? I feel like he would be a bit more, not renowned, but people would be aware of him. Like, he would be sort of one of those killers that people almost turn into a celebrity. Like, there would absolutely be a true crime drama about him manipulating Nathan. I don't doubt it. There are murder cases across the US that instantly, I feel like within a few months, there's already a Lifetime movie about it. Now we're going to talk about the detective who is featured very, very briefly in the trailer. We see him sort of standing in front of a reflection of himself, as well as confronting Max and showing his badge off. Now, the shots, in my opinion, would imply that he is some sort of antagonist. Now, whether we're supposed to be suspicious of him for Safi's murder, or if he is suspicious of Max, considering that Max was the first person to find Safi after this murder, I'm not really sure. But I believe he is intended to be an antagonist. Some people have not really pointed out, but some people claim that he looks like Nathan. I really don't see it. He's just a guy with similar colored hair that's pushed back. I really think he's going to be an original character, not some sort of returning character from a previous game. Unless he's Skip all grown up. Oh yeah. There was a theory that Moses, one of the people within Max's new friend group at this university, could be the killer. But ultimately, it seems like that's already been, ruled out, as he was behind Max already when she found Safi's body. And finally, the theory that has set the Life is Strange fandom on absolute fire. How the heck is this not Rachel Amber? She has the same mole, she has the same voice actress, but she hasn't really aged. She looks, pretty close to the age that we see her, or the age that she would have been in Life is Strange 1 before she disappeared. Now, they call this a supernatural murder mystery, which I would say implies that the killer had powers of their own. And the only person who I could see, who has a connection to Max, who would be out here, is maybe Rachel Amber, because we know we theorize she had some sort of power, especially pertaining to the weather. However, that does seem a little out of left field. I more so want to focus on, is this Rachel Amber, and why is she even here? Now, this has led to some people saying that, it's possible that it wasn't Rachel's body that was buried in the junkyard, that it was never fully confirmed, even though we do see photos of her seemingly lifeless next to Nathan, that were photos that were taken by him before he supposedly buried her in that spot. So it seems pretty concrete, but what if she wasn't dead, somehow she gets away, and Jefferson and Nathan want to, sort of torment Max and Chloe by saying it's her. And it is exactly what she wanted. She wanted to disappear fully and have no more connections, because literally she would be considered dead. So it would be exactly what she wanted, but then why would she come out of the woodwork so many years later? One of the major plot points in the comic books is that Rachel Amber and Chloe and Max are all alive in one timeline. They actually even end up living together at some point. It is a little fan servicey, but if they're taking inspiration from the comics, which I feel like they already are, what's to say they don't take that? There's not really a concrete explanation, at least as far as I've read, on how she is alive in the comics, but she's there, and her and Chloe are close, and it seems like their plan sort of worked. When Max is going back and forth between timelines, maybe sometimes something sticks with her, something comes back with her. Maybe it's people, maybe it's objects, and maybe this time around, she accidentally pulls in, someone who's nearby, being Rachel, to her timeline. Or we actually don't know which timeline she's speaking to this person in, whether it's the, I'm going to say main timeline for the one where Safi is dead, whether it's the main timeline or the one where she's alive, we don't know. We aren't particularly sure which one this character is in, or if she's in both. So I feel like it wouldn't be that far-fetched for some of the consequences of going back and forth between these two timelines to be that something comes with you. You leave something behind and you take something with you. And that would play into the sort of, what are the consequences of using time travel? Well, it eventually compounds in on itself and, a disaster happens. Or it's just, sort of a bait and switch for the audience, kind of a cheap move, but, it is what it is. Alright, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And I see the Gravity Falls video is doing so great and you guys love it, and that really means a lot to me. I have to move into college soon, so I don't think there will be any issues with recording. I'm just going to record another video very soon and time it to be uploaded that week, so you guys won't even know it, but I'll have everything set up for everything. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate every single one of you. Yeah, have a good evening or morning or night or, whatever.